There we go.
Hello and welcome to our weekly Integral Web Jam. My name is Martin Utschig and I'm the author of Integral Relationships, a Manual for Man, and my new book, Sex, Purpose, Love, Couples in Integral Relationships, Creating a Better World. So today I'm thrilled to be with my good friend, Wesly Feuquay. Can you say your last name correctly?
Yeah, Feuquay. Like it would be Fewqa if it was phonetic. Yeah, Feuquay.
Feuquay. I always call you Wesly, so I don't know.
It's going to be good enough.
Yeah. So welcome, Wesly.
That's funny.
And we will explore today what people, and especially women, mean when they say, I want to be with a partner who is conscious or be with a conscious partner. And as always, we invite you to participate by first typing your name on the right side of the screen at the bottom, and also let us know where you join us from. And there you can also type your questions and comments. If you are single, you're also welcome to put in your integralsingles.com screen name or your Facebook profile name. And especially today, we encourage you to join us also live. There's a little hand symbol on the top right of your screen that you can click. And once I accept your request, a small plugin will be downloaded and to your browser, and your camera and your microphone will be tested. And then once you come online, please know that this conversation is recorded and will be posted on Facebook. So you give your permission to be included in that. Is that okay with you, Wesly?
Yep, fine by me.
Yeah, great.
Everything you say will be broadcast across the universe.
Yeah. So welcome, Michael. He just typed in his name, and you're from sunny California. Yes, it's very sunny here today. So before we fully start, I want to introduce Wesly to you. Wesly has a master's degree in education and is the founder of Psylogia. Again, did I say it right?
The Psylogia Institute.
Psylogia Institute for the Development of Consciousness, Purpose, and Transformation. So that's why we're all here, developing in consciousness, finding our purpose, and of course, life is an ongoing transformation. Wesly served for 15 years at the psychological science faculty at the Maricopa colleges. There is more than one?
Yes, there's 17.
Oh, wow. In Arizona, as well as creating coursework for the psychology of consciousness and mature ego development. Wesly mentors unique inner genius. Wow. Teaches integral psychology theory and utilizes psycho-spiritual modalities of healing and transformation. Combined, Wesly weaves these modalities to bring about psychological relief, heal trauma, and overcome personal struggles and setbacks. Further, he specializes in life purpose discovery, uncovering inner brilliance, co-creative goal actualization, and cultivating peak human potentials. So I guess I could have you on every website you have, because you pretty much cover the whole integral relationships map and territory.
Yeah, how about that? Sounds great.
So thank you for everyone for joining us. And again, type your name and where you call us from, or where you join us from on the right side of the screen, and join us live. Because first, I want to ask you, what does it mean to you to be conscious? I'm always tickled when somebody says, I want to be with a conscious partner, or my partner was so unconscious, because the medical explanation, of course, is to be asleep or be in a coma or be not self-aware. And
right.
You know, maybe somebody may call me, I'm a very unconscious man, but I know I'm living and breathing and not in a coma right now. So what does consciousness mean? And maybe a first take from you. What do you think, what it means when people, and specifically women, say, I want to be with a conscious partner?
Man, you realize you're asking the biggest question ever, right? That we've been trying to figure out what consciousness is.
I thought the biggest question is, what does it mean? What's the meaning of life? But okay.
I might be better to answer it now. Yeah. What is consciousness? Oh my gosh, such a broad topic. I think though, for the purpose of the conversation, because I was thinking about this, before coming on, and what occurred to me is that obviously consciousness is that ability to be awake to yourself, awake to what's going on around you, awake in all four quadrants, really, right? Within the environment that you're in, within yourself, within your relationships with other people. And I think what I wanted to say was that we can say that we're conscious at any level of waking up or growing up or showing up, and that we could include levels into how conscious we actually are. So I think it's, for the sake of this audience and for the discussion between you and I, there is something about to be conscious is to be aware, probably self-aware, certainly aware of environment. And so I wanted to include it and say, I think it's awareness in all four quadrants. And I think it's awareness at least three basic levels. And that anywhere in that spectrum, we can talk about somebody being conscious. And then what we're going to find out is we've got different levels and different places where we're awake, different places where we're aware. And so I think we can't look at it too narrowly or too linearly. We have to almost look at it as a spectrum or even a matrix. Yeah. So those are my first thoughts. What do you think about that?
Well, my next question is because you used the word awareness and consciousness. And do you differentiate what it means, what awareness means and what consciousness means? Or are there synonyms?
I think they could be synonyms in certain contexts, and then we could differentiate them if we needed to. So, I mean, consciousness to me is the overarching umbrella of all phenomena arising. So there's the backdrop, right, to everything that we could call consciousness. So I think we'd have to get into that sticky territory of really defining what it is that we're talking about, given the context that we're talking about it in. I'm okay with using awareness and consciousness as synonyms sometimes. I think if I was working with my clients or I was speaking to a large group of people, I'd probably just use the word awakening or awareness or something like that. But certainly in these more integral and theoretical conversations, we could talk about consciousness being differentiated from that. Yeah. So consciousness for me is the root essence, or the backdrop that it all happens on. It's the sort of canvas that we're painting on. Yeah.
Okay. And so, of course, I speak from a male perspective, and again, I invite comments and feedback from males as well. But I often hear, New Age or integral women, more evolved women, if you want to say it that way, that they say, I want to be with a conscious partner, or I left him because he was so unconscious, and then of course, I mean, I wrote 2 books on that, so I have an opinion. But I'm curious, then often ask what did that mean? How did that show up? And it's to me, it's a funny way of expressing that.
I think it's a good inquiry. I think we have to talk about what does an individual mean when they say that, because they could be using it colloquially and sort of a subtle put down of somebody, or they could mean it in a very developmentally encouraging way. So it's worth talking about who's saying that, who's the message coming from, and what would they mean from the level or the cosmic address, if you will. What do they mean when they say that? And I think what we're going to find is that people at different levels or different places, they probably mean that in an ever so slightly different way. Because I can see someone saying that same word, he wasn't conscious enough, and saying he wasn't sensitive enough, or he wasn't meeting the demands that I was placing upon him. And I could see it as a developmental encouragement of, we wanted to mature and grow together, and one of us was growing faster than the other one. And so I could see it going in different ways. It's a very tricky word, right? Because I'm not sure if everybody knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, what comes to mind is what Ken uses this in his new book, The Religion of Tomorrow, is where we all speak our language, and use grammar typically in the correct way, and structure the language in a correct way without having any theoretical understanding about why we speak correctly, unless we study language and teach grammar and things like that. And so often I feel when people say, he was so unconscious or she was so unconscious, they know that something is off, right? That the language that the other person speaks, in speaking metaphorically, didn't resonate with them, so they didn't understand each other really, but they couldn't explain where the difference comes from. They cannot say, I was seeing the world from a pluralistic level and he or she saw the world from a mythic level. They just see that something is off. Yeah. And then they may call it the other person was so unconscious.
Right. Yeah.
Even though the person was conscious, but from another level of development.
Yes. Right. Because once you start separating the levels within a relationship, you start getting into strife. You start getting into different meaning making systems, right? Yeah. And the language is different, right? We could probably say that the way you use language and the language that you use shifts as you develop into these levels. I've always said that you can really detect where somebody's at because it's embedded in your language. It's how you use language. It's the words you use. It's the way you describe the things going on around you. Yeah. So you use that word in different ways, right?
Yep. So maybe I prepared a little PowerPoint, so maybe we can unpack it a little bit more. Yeah. Do you think that makes sense at this point?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
but we may have thrown out a lot of terms and things already that may be not fully clear to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody wants to clarify that, they can put it in the chat box, right? And we can clarify something for someone, right? Excellent.
So first I have a few slides to give an overview. And on the left side, we see these 7 levels of consciousness that integral people typically use and that we already referred to a little bit.
That's right.
And then on the top, we see 5 what integral people call stages, and that's usually what I call awareness in my language. So consciousness is on the left side, awareness is across the top. So am I aware of the gross level of the physical body, of physical objects around me, which animals are, I would assume? Or am I also aware of thoughts, that my thoughts are actually images that arrive in my mind, but they're not necessarily real, right? So can I watch my thoughts, my mind? Then the third level, am I aware of my experiences related often to feelings, intuition? I don't know what other words we could use on the causal level. So like the level where thoughts arise from, right? And then the witness stage is when there is no more observer that observes anything else, is where the experience and the observer itself collapse. And then the non-dual awareness is sort of like the emptiness is form and form is emptiness, that there is, fullness and emptiness are both real and unreal. And so there's no more duality. So that's just a quick overview. Any comments on this before I jump further?
Such a brilliant chart, isn't it? To help us understand that anybody can be at any stage and have any state experience, and it's all legitimate. Right. Such a beautiful.
And this is obviously developed, or not obviously developed, by Ken Wilber and Alan Combs.
That's right.
Professor of Consciousness Studies. And so again, if somebody may say, well, this person wasn't conscious, it could either be that since people mix up consciousness and awareness, it could either refer to the vertical line on the left side, up and down, right? That the people who felt the other person was unconscious was at a higher level of consciousness than the other person, and then in my mind wrongly says that person was unconscious.
Yeah.
It just means it was not conscious he was or she was not conscious at my level. Or they can mean spiritual awareness and use consciousness and awareness interchangeably and say, well, I was at a causal level of spiritual awareness and he or she maybe was only at a gross level. And they may have been at the same rational or pluralistic level of consciousness development.
Yeah.
So
such a beautiful distinction to have the difference between states and stages, right?
Yeah. And I'm always switching back to seeing if there are any comments or questions. And so if we dig in a little deeper now, we see the left side of that previous slide, the levels of consciousness, a little bit more detailed. And maybe you can quickly explain the ladder climber view on the left side, the ladder. Do you want to go into that?
Oh, you want me to go in the ladder climber view? I'm going to let you do that.
Oh,
I want to make sure that the language stays congruent with your teachings. So I'm going to let you.
Well, it's all Kent's teachings, obviously.
Yeah.
That's not my stuff. But so when we develop in consciousness, and we can quickly go to the climb up the ladder then with more slides, is like as we go up, our view gets wider. We include more perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And we also transcend the limited views, the things that are no longer useful from the previous run or from the previous level that we come from. So a simple example is when we grow in consciousness, we still need to go to the bathroom and eat and survive, right? That would be sort of like the level 1, but we're no longer acting like a newborn baby or a very young baby. So in other words, we no longer shit in our pants. We go to the toilet, to be very graphic. So the digestion and the metabolizing and everything is included, but you get the idea.
Yeah, so, and I also want to say something too about consciousness development, is that we have to move through those stages, transcending and integrating each stage. We can't jump stages. There's no way of skipping stages. We have to developmentally move through them.
Yes.
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't fully integrate the rung, right? So even though we had to go through that rung, we don't integrate all the healthy aspects of the rung, and sometimes we don't transcend all the limited views and unhealthy aspects. And this is very important and interesting for relationships then, because when two people come together, these two ladders, so to speak, that have completely differently fully developed rungs or have rungs with certain holes, that can actually create attractors. If someone has more integration on one level than another person, that may make a partner attractive.
Yeah.
And so another thing that I think discovered, or what's the right word? I guess discovered, was when people studied these developmental models, they mainly came from males, even though there are a few women, and they mainly interviewed males in finding out, what these different worldviews. Mm-hmm. And because women often gave answers that they could not put into their maps, into their systems, oddly enough. And so as I thought a lot about that, and then also, of course, dating a lot of women in my case, I realized that men tend to grow more like the banks of the river, like with transcending and excluding, and then their worldview and their way of operating comes mainly from the highest level that they have reached. While women, and maybe more feminine men, they seem to grow more by transcending and including the previous levels, and often then, of course, also including the limited views or retaining the limited views and the unhealthy aspects of each level. And then they flow more like the rising and the falling of the level of a river up to the highest level that they have reached. Right?
Hey, Mark, we've got a really good question, and we've also got somebody asking for some clarification.
Okay.
So Nathan wanted to go back a slide and just wants to know what it says next to infrared, and then Greg's got a really good question.
Yeah. Thank you, because I don't see the questions right now. So if you could just read the questions.
Yeah, so Nathan's asking, what does it say next to infrared, because our video is in the way? So it probably says basic survival or something.
Yes, basic survival. And I cannot move the video, so we have to put up with it.
So Nathan, it does say basic survival. Yeah. And then Greg's asking, he says, you guys stated that you cannot skip stages, but in your book, Martin, you suggested the need to skip green. Can you elaborate?
Oh, I did not suggest to skip green. Maybe let's just go through the stages in a little bit more detail, like for about 5 minutes, unless there be questions coming up, and then I'll come back to the question, which is very, very important in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So okay, we got this transcend and include thing, and this is often a big aha for men and women in my workshops and talks, because let's say a man is at a green level, and again, this applies maybe to 80% of men and women, right? Not every man and woman. It's sort of like a generalizing orientation. Then if the man predominantly operates from the green level, let's say, the woman feels met by him on her green level if she's also at a green level, but not so much or not at all on the orange side. Let's say the man is no longer success and money driven, and on her amber needs, for stability and certain norms and rules, and on her red, strong self-expression and exerting her power, and maybe on certain superstitious or magical systems, like even can we rationalize falling in love, or is that something that's sort of like magic, right? So Teal integral men then, of course, have the advantage that they understand all the previous level and have a better chance of meeting women at whatever level they're at. And you monitor the question side, right? So
everybody's happy at the moment.
Yeah. So we come back to that slide that I just showed. So the infrared level is dead or alive. So we see and the basic qualities are survival instincts and oneness with nature. And the limited views is no conscious awareness of interior, past, or future. So it's like in our earliest animalistic nature.
Yeah.
And then the second magenta level is safe or unsafe. So historically, that comes from deep bonding with family, group, or tribe. And the limited view at the top right is no individuality, false beliefs in magic. And chime in, Wesly, if you have a...
Yeah, maybe just make a mention to people that some of the images you have maybe referring to books that speak to that level, either entry or exit, and that there's even some cinematic themes that people can attach to here. It's beautiful how you did this.
So in the movie As Good As You Get, Jack Nicholson shows all these superstitious behavior, at least at the beginning, where he doesn't step on cracks in the road and steps over his feet and locks his door 7 times and whatnot. And what we also see at this level now is that each level of development has its own relationship books, love relationship books. Mm-hmm. So this is love science book, use astrology to find your perfect partner. And astrology here, I don't mean in a certain scientific or psychological or advanced way, but in a very basic literal explanation, right? If somebody's born in a certain month or whatever, some women literally don't date men who have not a compatible birthday. Okay. And again, if you want to watch this again, this will be on YouTube. So if you go a little fast and you want to dig in, you can go back to the YouTube video. So we go red, egocentric, good or bad. And here we have power, independence, creativity, spontaneity, uninhibited, carefree, alive, authentic, refreshingly open, and also setting of healthy, but sometimes too narrow boundaries on. So like, why are you looking at me? What do you want? Right. I mean, that can be a healthy boundary, but it can also push people away. Right. So that's a little, and as you can see that the basic qualities and capacities get more complex and more evolved. And the limited view is it's all about me. It's all about now. I want to think about consequences for the future, and I don't want to consider the past. I just want to be happy, feel good right now.
I like how you wrote good or bad for me, just to really tap into that egocentrism of yeah, that's good.
And so here, interestingly, we see a split between books written for men and written for women. But if you think about it, that must be so because it's egocentric, right? It's all about me, not about the interest of the other sex. Mm-hmm. So here you have the pickup artist books for men who, in the worst case scenario, only want sex from a woman and totally objectify her, right? And we have the rules, which only talks about, what a woman can get out of a man without having any of his interests in mind. So that's why I put these books there. And also interestingly, in Groundhog Day, we see how, what's the actor's name?
That's Bill Murray.
Bill Murray advances from the egocentric stage to the mythic stage. So it's a transformational movie. That's why people are so fascinated by it. He becomes conscious in a way, if you look from a mythic perspective, or maybe even from a rational. So we could say he was very unconscious in the beginning of the movie, right? But of course, he was conscious just from a red level. And then he advanced to become a conscious man in the mythic level. Then the next amber stage. And of course, these stages, evolved during the history of humans. So this stage emerged with the invention of agriculture. And we have stability, order, purpose, rules, loyalty, hope, recognition, morals, honors past, and considers future. So these are the bullet points. The limited views are mythic beliefs, only one right way, my God, my country, my company, my sports team. Marginalizes nonconformists who don't conform to that particular worldview, is inflexible, rigid, and we also see the rise of patriarchy. That's important to see that really arises on this level. Amazing movie, The Tree of Life, where you see the struggles of people between the mythic and the rational level. Pope and men are from Mars, Venus are from Venus, right? It's men are like that, women are like that, and it's set in stone, so to speak. Great book, but not at the next level. Any comments, feedback from you, Wesly?
No, Amber's pretty straight. I find it really great and humorous at the same time that it's men are from Mars and women are from Venus. It was such a groundbreaking book when it came out. Everybody loved that book. Yeah. And it really does speak to that sort of blue amber, amber stage.
But I also had this experience that I hear often from many men, that my ex-wife bought me that book at one time. And I just read about all that stuff that I had screwed up in our marriage. And I also got this sense like I can never make that up, right? There's already too much damage created. And so it was also a frustrating experience. And I sometimes women say, oh, I want to buy your book, Integral Relationships, a Manual for Men, for my partner, so he can, and I immediately feel bad because I know it doesn't get over well, when a woman buys her man a book and says, I want you to be like that.
Well, I think with a book like that, it reduces men and women to a typology, right? It's not including this particular kind of developmental diversity that we're talking about here and we're approaching with these slides. It reduces us to a typology, which is limited. It's not wrong, it's just limited.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's hinderingly limited.
Yeah. As we said, it's transcend and include. So there is, of course, wisdom in it that we certainly need to include.
Beautiful.
Then the orange level is the rational level. So win or lose. Objectivity, the good life for all, liberty for all, happiness for all, democracy. We're familiar because mostly we share these values. But it's also rational, so not very emotional. It's calculating, cold, and can be cold and driven by status and success, and often has little consideration for the environment and for so-called losers. I think this whole idea that we live in our bubbles really emerges at the orange level, where we become somewhat unaware and disconnected from people who live in, not in as affluent, who don't live a good life. I mean, I was just in Las Vegas, where you see this whole range, right, of people. Any comments from you, Wesly?
No, this looks great. You may want to just talk about some of these books. I see you've got Alison Armstrong up there, and you've got Elizabeth Gilbert's book. Those might be worth mentioning. I think everybody would be interested in what you've got to say about those particular books in terms of whether they're transitioning into orange or out.
Yes. So Alison Armstrong, she writes celebrating men, satisfying women. So it's in a way a rational approach to how men want to be treated in order to satisfy mainly the materialistic needs, and company and so on, and so taking care of women. And it's very much based on an exchange of sexuality for material well-being, and happiness in a way, right? If you want to make your man happy, behave that way, and if you want to have your woman happy, behave that way. So it's all around the good life in a way. It's also interesting that the authors of these kind of relationship books mainly live in Los Angeles, while the people who write books for the next level mainly live in Northern California. I noticed. And Eat, Pray, Love obviously, goes a little bit into the spiritual realm at the end, but it is also written, in my opinion, very much around the materialistic level and finding happiness through exterior, mainly through exterior means. My opinion. And we will see when we get to the next level that the flavor totally changes on the book level. Any more questions there, Wesly, or comments?
No, that was great. Thanks for clarifying that. I love this use of your books and stuff.
And also not on the right side of the screen from the people who watch us. Okay, now we go to this next, and this is a big step to what we call the green level, sensitive or indifferent, where there's like a focus on the inner of our inner being, spirituality. Psychology, actually, I position in orange in the previous level, in a Freudian sense, or Freudian psychology, but then with Carl Jung, and we get sort of like a shift into the green. So, but originally psychology originated from, in my opinion, from orange level.
Yes, all of humanistic psychology would fit into this category. So,
and so here we get equality. And green people usually don't like hierarchy. So if you reject this idea of that there is a hierarchy in consciousness development, you're probably at quite a high level, but not at an integral level yet. But maybe that shifts during that conversation. So here it's all about equality, sensitivity, compassion, non-judgmental, holistic, caring, environmentally conscious. There we use the word conscious. So this also reminds me to mention that conscious makes much more sense if somebody precedes that with another word. So if they say, oh, he was so emotionally unconscious or environmentally unconscious, or, then I have a better grasp on what people mean, instead of just saying he or she was unconscious. Well, unconscious about what, right? So celebrates the feminine. So we see this shift of patriarchy and then somewhat equality between men and women. So women can be like men in a way. And now we shift over to the feminine is superior to the masculine, and, matriarchy, which really never existed, would be superior to patriarchy. So like often an idea that we should establish matriarchal system and do away with patriarchy. So that would be another area where women often may say, well, he was so patriarchal. I hear that often, right? Or on the other side, then he was so weak, right? And then men get confused. So should I be strong and then be, called a patriarch, or should I be sensitive and weak? And then I'm not attractive any longer to women because they don't perceive me as a strong protector and provider. We have animal rights, sexual liberation, and I put authentic polyamory there because if people use the term polyamory for just like, having multiple sex partners without all the guidelines and rules that the inventors or the developers of polyamory have put out there, then it often comes from a red egocentric stage. Right? That's why it's authentic polyamory.
Martin, we've got a couple good questions. You want to just hear one of these? One of them is applicable here. So Amelia is saying, if women flow more up and down the levels of consciousness, she says, I'm curious if you think that relationship books that represent different levels of consciousness might be useful at different times. She says, example, I'm thinking about how I've always thought Meta from Mars is dumb, but now I'm questioning if it might appeal to me in a certain mood. It's a great question.
Yeah. And yeah, the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. Go with your mood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in those times, it would speak to you more than in other times, huh?
And I don't do much, I call it consulting, but sometimes I see that even, let's say, a green person doesn't have the mythic level implemented or integrated enough in a healthy way. And then I would even then suggest, why don't you take a look at a mythic relationship book, of which men are from Mars, women are from Venus. So I like all these relationship books. I mean, I can read any relationship book and find some really good wisdom in it, and often even like, wow, I haven't integrated that magic, that egocentric, that mythic, that heart, level in a way. So thanks for that question or clarification or insight. So on the limited side, so often we think of the green level, and green people, they often think since it's holistic and includes everything, that there is no shadow, right? There is nothing that they exclude. But then when we look a little deeper, we find out there is actually some things are excluded, are limited views. And one is endless processing and inability to reach any decisions, because if you want to include 10 or 20 or 100 perspectives, that is a long time. Tough. Yeah. We have the pre-trans fallacy, which we can come back to maybe a little later, confuses natural with dominator hierarchies. So this is the idea that letters form words and words form sentences and sentences form paragraphs and so on and so forth, or cells form tissue and tissue form organs and organs form humans. So all nature in integral language is built of natural hierarchies that increase in complexity, but also include the lower levels. So organs do not repress cells, or cells do not exclude atoms, but there is also dominator hierarchies, which we see in human behavior, where the higher dominates the lower. And so green often wants to get rid of any kind of hierarchy and does not distinguish between natural hierarchies and dominator hierarchies. Marginalizes often men that are patriarchal. So if men are feminine, then of course they get included. And the masculine, and elevates the feminine goddess image over the masculine man god image, and we get New Age narcissism.
Yeah.
So
that sounds like my Facebook feed.
Yeah. And performative contradictions, the famous one is like, I don't like people who are judgmental, and not seeing in that moment that is a judgment, by saying that you are judgmental. So,
Martin, are you able to talk about? Somebody's asked the question. It's a little ways back now. Let's see. Oh, Amelia wanted to know if you can read what the cartoon says with Gandhi and MLK.
Oh, sure.
Do you know? It's back on that slide. Do you know what the little cartoon on the left? Do you have any idea what the quote
I
is?
know it, but I can also not read it. But he basically says, Gandhi says to King, "It's funny, they think they can kill us, but our ideas continue to live on."
Oh, of course.
I'm not exactly sure how he
okay.
How he exactly phrases it.
Got it.
Maybe you can Google it.
Okay, cool.
Good question. Anyway, and quickly to these books on the right side. Mm-hmm. So there's two types of relationship books, or maybe books in general. Some books that help people to become more healthy at the level where they're at. So to solve their relationship books at the same level. Mm-hmm. And then there are books for people who are kind of transcending, transforming to the next higher level. And so in case that the Way of the Superior Man is a book for pathologically green men to advance potentially to the integral level, while the Way of the Path to Love and Love and Awakening are more helping people to integrate better on the green level. Great. And that's also with transformation, of course, that usually takes a few years to transform from one level to the other. So the transformational weekend workshop is, in a way, false advertising. Maybe you get a state experience of the next higher level. And Wesly, you're an expert in that field, so we should come back to that, how to use state experiences for transformation to next higher levels.
Stage development,
yeah. I see we have to go a little faster. And now we make this major jump from first-tier consciousness into what Ken Wilber or spiral dynamics calls second-tier consciousness. In other words, in relationships, we usually go from need-based relationship to being-based evolutionary relationships. So when you read profiles for I need someone to be this and this and this and this and this and this, by reading what these needs are, you can often then position the people somewhat at what level of consciousness they are. And people in second tier, they're more writing, what they want to contribute to the world, or maybe there's some healing, growing, waking up, showing up comments. So in Integral, really nice painting by Alex Gray, recognizes the importance of all preceding levels, includes the process of development of itself. So the whole relationship becomes a practice of becoming healthy at each level of development, and seeing the levels and meeting, specifically men meeting their female partner or more feminine partner at whatever level she operates in the moment from, or needs to be held or contained. Because if we think about that, go back to that image of the river, the banks and the flow, that what comes from David Data, if the woman is at a higher level, she kind of overflows and no longer feels to be contained. But if the banks are not flexible enough, right, that the man can adjust to the feminine flow in a kind of holding but not limiting way, then the woman feels, too controlled and not free enough. So that's integral men are much more able to do that. Integral does not force its own values onto others. So if you follow that conversation, you probably see that we're not dissing all these previous levels, but we see that they all live in Wesly and you and me, in all of us, and they all have their value.
Yeah.
But integral people are the only ones who can even maybe see some positive aspects in the presidency of Donald Trump, right? Or of things that most other people or a majority may reject. But also we see the limitations more clearly.
It's true.
Knowledge and competence supersede rank, power, gender, or status. So, we're no longer just putting men at a higher level just because we're men. Flexibility, spontaneity, and functionality become the highest priority. And again, integral people can be frustrated, especially with green, which is a bit of a paradox to what I just said on the left side. We can be cynical, cold, calculating, distant, opportunistic, manipulative, overly analytical, and arrogant, and can feel quickly discouraged and bored, as we think we have seen and had it all. We often feel isolated and alone. And you see, I use the term we because a part of me still lives in so like the integral world, and a part lives in the next level. And I like that image at the top right, of the meditator sitting in his or her bubble with the 4 quadrants, sort of like as an image of an integral person. Cloud Atlas, the movie and the book. And American Beauty I find interesting because there you see the clash between egocentric, mythic, rational, and green people in the movie, and then the neighbor who films everything and seems to get along and understand all these levels. He's sort of like at an integral level. So if you watch American Beauty through an integral lens, I think it's very educational. And of course, Ken's book, my book, Integral Relationships, so on and so forth. And I haven't looked at the turquoise level in a while. I think I have new insights around turquoise, so forgive me. That slide is about 2 years old. So embodiment. So we're not only talking about these levels on a transpersonal level, but we really work on embodying all the levels in a healthy way. Full embrace, interweaving, tantric, non-dual, deep ecology. an evolutionary desire to co-create and procreate to serve universal goals with partners and others and wisdom. So that's my wishful thinking part, that post-integral transpersonal people move back to a deep desire to have healthy relationships, and if they can, with children. And actually there is some evidence, because some of the younger followers of Ken Wilber, or who work with or for him, they have recently procreated, not because I told them, of course it was an inner impulse, but I think we see this when young people transcend even the integral level, that they're more interested again in a healthy relationship in children, and then build family and community and society, instead of jumping from the individual to community. But we also have seen that a limited perspective or limited aspects are radical when it comes to ego transcendence, and sometimes be feelings of spiritual superiority and evolutionary elitism. Yeah. Gurus, teachers negligent about blind spots and uneven development, and inability to create sustainable organizational structures. Because I think that, I mean, I don't go into that, but I think that's, when there is a jump from individual to collective, and the couple and the family with children is not in between to support communities, then they have a tendency to collapse.
Nice.
And maybe my new book, Sex, Purpose, Love, actually would fit in here, because I think it advances into that next level of relating. All right. So then we can create a matrix, and we will have another webcam with David Fonsbro from Denmark, who picked up on that idea and created a whole website with more detail.
Nice.
what's going to happen. So that's very fascinating. And then we can bring this all together in what I call the personality matrix, where we see the levels on the left side, and then what we started out with, the Wilbur Combs lattice, the spiritual in the under horizontal stages. You see the 5 levels there. And that's also true for sexual development, from repressed to fucking to having sex, to making love, to transcendental sexuality.
Nice.
And the anima animus complex, which will be maybe a topic for another conversation. And then in the center, we see the feminine masculine polarities, how they typically develop, that females, after, when they're about 3-4, swing over through socialization to their feminine side, and men to their masculine side, and unless they're raised in maybe by integral couples where there is more integration. And then females tend to swing over to their masculine in the orange stage, men. And then you have what David Data has, this like egalitarian, right? No more sexual polarity when there is this overlap. And then males swing over to their feminine side, and you get this confusion between feminine and masculine. And then integral and transpersonal people can embody healthy feminine and masculine polarities. And it was really great to speak about it with Michaela Böhm last week. So if you have time, go to my Facebook channel, and you can watch that conversation where we really go into details about that top part of this personality matrix. Nice. Any feedback there?
Just a question from Deborah. She says, I'm curious to hear at some point why you mentioned women as wanting conscious relationships. She says, I do. And she asked, are you seeing women calling for this more than men these days?
I mean, I'm a man, so I'm somewhat biased, right? But when I talk to men, I cannot remember ever a man saying, I want a woman who's more conscious, or I want a conscious partner. Well, maybe that's not exactly true, but I see that way less than men saying it. And I think one reason for that is that I personally see that there are way more women in the pluralistic green stage than there are men. And this whole idea of being conscious and unconscious is more language that emerges in the green level, while there are more men in the mythic and orange levels, I would say. And they just use different language. They have different interests. of course, probably if we say 70% of people in green are women and 30% are men, then that would sort of like explain my bias or my observation, right? That there's more women who want talk about a conscious man. And of course, when men talk to me about relationships, they more talk about things around sexuality and their own pain that they experienced in relationships with women. As we know, 70% of relationships are ended by women, and 70% of divorces are filed by women because their partners were unconscious, right? It's sort of like they didn't feel met, they didn't feel understood on all the levels, on a material, on a physical, on a mental, on an emotional, on a spiritual level.
You know, Martin, I had a thought when you were going through the slides, and we've been trying to talk about what is someone saying when they say, I want to, my partner should be more conscious. And I thought, you know, we could really bring in lines here as well. Like we could say for sure, well, do you mean consciousness in a quadrant? Like, okay, do you have a pulse? Is your heart beating? Are you, are you more than your reptilian brainstem aware right now? But I think when we move to the upper left, we could really be talking about certain lines too. You know, how conscious are you in the personal line or the musical line or the spiritual line or the, you know, the kinesthetic line, that those two might be a place where we could say, because I think someone might orient their life around a particular line, and then that would be very valuable to them.
Yeah.
And then is that person conscious in that line? Because they might be conscious in another line.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm the most ecologically conscious person in the world, but certainly on another realm, say interpersonal, I would say, you know, I'm a lot higher.
Yeah.
So we would almost want to bring in the idea that, you know, at what line, what domain are we talking about?
That's
might be
a very
important
good point.
too.
Yeah. So when I start to date someone and I realize that person is very visual, I tell them that I'm just not a visual person. And some women then see that's sort of like complementary because they can see that I have other qualities. And for other women, it's just really important that I know how to dress, that I know how to appreciate, you know, beauty, visual beauty. And this is just hard for me, right? And so it's
Right.
so they could say he was so unconscious or he's so unconscious about anything visual and how to dress and things like that. So I like that. So maybe a takeaway also from me here is then to just ask more clearly in what areas was he or she unconscious and where did you not feel met? And in what areas do you see he was actually conscious and maybe even more conscious or aware than you were, right? To point to people that Michaela Böhmer made that really important point last week that sameness creates stability in the relationship and sort of like comfort, but difference creates sexual attraction.
Yes,
and so, and of course, then I would say also create synergy if we know how to riff off our strengths and complement us in our where we don't have strengths, right? Which is often genetic, right? I'm just genetically preconditioned not to be a visual person. Was not my choice to be a little colorblind. It's just a fact.
Yes.
So, Michael, yes, there are dating sites. That's actually also a good question because I could put that in the slides as well, that each level of consciousness has dating sites that cater to that particular level. So the sites that are just purely sexually oriented, we could say they cater to red, to egocentric, and maybe a little bit to green. And then eHarmony is sort of like the classic website started by a pastor who studied relationships for Mythic people. And then Match.com is very orange, right? How much money do you make? How tall are you? Are you height weight proportional? Do the pictures look sexy? You know, are you presentable to my affluent, successful friends? Then integral, spiritual singles and green singles, which are now under one umbrella. Conscious Dating, I think, is the organization. Caters to green people. Interesting little side note, Craigslist, which I always also said has green people, pluralistic and red people, stopped having personals, I just saw, because of the whole sexual harassment movement. So no more dating on free dating on Craigslist. And then for integral people, I created integralsingles.com, which has about 850 members from around the world. So you also see that the more evolved the websites become, the dating websites, the more international they become. Match.com is still country by country, so you have to, create different profiles if you want to date in different countries. While spiritual singles and green singles, they have you can see they present you with people from around the world. So I find it also interesting because each level, of course, goes further into the world. Meetmindful.com. Yeah, I have heard that website a few times now, so that seems to be an upcoming thing.
It tends to be a little green,
There is about, I don't know how many websites there are now, but so there was an earlier question that I said we would answer later. What
oh, yeah. Let me go back. I can find it for you. It was...
skipped stages, not ski. Oh, that I suggested that...
it said from Greg.
So I said that, but I didn't say it in the right way. So Jenny Wade opened me in what's her book? Senior moment. We'll come back. Jenny Wade wrote a book on consciousness development, and she observed as a woman that a lot of women, they don't really skip the orange stage, but there is very little integration on the orange state. I think she actually says some women skip the orange stage. Maybe they get married to a wealthy partner in the mythic stage, never have to really develop any marketable skill, so to speak, and they can pursue the good life based on his income. I don't know what the exact metrics are, and then they move directly into the green stage with very little integration on the orange stage. And I can definitely say that I often have men in the integral relationship workshops and trainings, which the next one, by the way, will be in Turkey, in Istanbul, for 5 days in May, who really have integral theory down up to the wazoo. But as soon as we do embodiment, which is on the first level practiced on the green level, they often have little integration on that level. I was just lucky enough to be in California during my green phase and have a lot of access to Tantra and Human Awareness Institute and spiritual workshops to do a lot of integration there. And so what I'm saying is maybe women who kind of, and then I say women may also skip the integral stage. So they may kind of jump from green directly to turquoise, while men have jumped from orange to integral and have little green integration. And then they can come back on this higher level where men on the turquoise level, in a way, practice and learn from the woman how to embody healthy green, assuming that she has embodied healthy green. And the man can help the woman to embody better healthy integral and possibly rational orange.
Martin, whenever this topic comes up, I'm reminded of an integral theory footnote. A lot of people don't talk about it much, but there was an idea that it could be possible that orange and green might be the masculine and feminine expression of a same meta level. And that there could be an argument also that yellow and turquoise might be another masculine or feminine expression of another meta level. And then maybe in another century or so, when we look back, we may not really differentiate orange and green, but maybe it'll be a level that was expressed in one typology or another, and the same being for yellow and turquoise. I always love that little idea that as we grow, we may look at the spectrum differently and understand that. Because I have also noticed that there seems to be an acceleration for men and women through either orange or green in a different way. So
So Jenny Wade's book is Changes of Mind, just came back. And Michaela suggested last week, and that's where she works a lot, is like completely dissociating feminine and masculine for men and women, which of course is, men and women have the same potential, but even we tend to slip into associating masculine with male and feminine with female.
Yeah, Rachel's got a question there.
Yes, Rachel, absolutely. And we will have Tom Habib on one of the next web jams. I think it's in June. And he wrote extensively about what the pre-trans fallacy, which we skipped over earlier, where we confuse transrational experiences with pre-rational experiences. But yes, I would say that these intense soul deep relationships are really going back to heal wounds in earlier levels of development. Would you go with that, Wesly?
Question? I want to ask Rachel a few more questions. I don't quite understand what she's asking. So if it's resonating with you, I'll just defer at this point and say, you must be getting it. I would just want to know a little bit more. So
okay.
I'm not quite sure what she's asking.
You're the therapist. I'm not, I can say anything I want.
Oh, yeah. Rachel, you can find me offline. We can talk about it as much as you want. I just want to ask you a few more questions.
Yeah. And there is Michael posted stages from Jenny Wade's book, Changes of Mind. So that's also a great book that is not as popular as Spiral Dynamics, but I found it really helpful, specifically also, I guess, because it was written by a woman and from a Kabbalistic, she takes a Jewish Kabbalistic view on relationships.
Beautiful.
So we're 3 minutes over time.
Okay.
Well, I noticed that I talked way more than I usually talk, and I noticed there would be so much more to discuss. And
you can bring me
a platform, so I definitely want to have you back and offer you more of a platform. But I also felt, we need to somehow lay the groundwork, and I'm fully aware right now that I was sort of imposing my view on everybody here and a little bit on you. And so
it's okay. Well, Martin, I learned something from this exchange today, and it was that if we do hear somebody say, I want a conscious partner, he wasn't conscious enough or she wasn't conscious enough. What I took from this today is that's an opportunity for me to ask a question and say, okay, what was it? Tell me, when you say that it wasn't conscious, what kind of not conscious was that? And see if I can't find out, was that a line difference? Was that a level difference? Was that a state difference? And that I shouldn't assume that I know what that person's talking about when they use that terminology, that it gives me an opportunity to open the dialogue a little bit further and find out. Because I think maybe what we didn't uncover today, but we can right now at the end, is I think that person might be a request. That person might be trying to actually ask for something in a question like that. That there was a need that went unmet for me. Oh, what is that? What is that need that remains unmet? And is that an interesting opening for communication, dialogue, friendship, relationship? Because I think maybe somebody's trying to communicate something in that statement and say, it was great or it wasn't great, and I'm left feeling unmet in certain needs.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm taking from today's dialogue. That means something that impacts me.
And what I feel is, I feel so like some level of cynicism just fell from my shoulders. And so, because I had this that man was conscious, he was not unconscious. And what you just said, is a new, something developed in me, something opened in me, and I transcended something.
Yeah, I think it's an invitation for all of us to communicate on a deeper level and find out, what are those unneeded nets? Why does that still have charge for you? We can use that. We can use that to create more dialogue, more interaction.
I see a shift. I feel a shift from cynicism to compassion right now,
right.
where I can have a different conversation about that.
That's beautiful, right?
Well, that's why I do these things, to learn and to grow. And thank you for all the comments and interaction. This was the most lively conversation, even though only in typing. And maybe we skipped a few of the comments. So I will stay online after we stop the recording and go through all the questions and type in some comments. And I think you can stay with us as well, Wesly.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe we can continue the dialogue for a few more minutes.
Yeah,
thank you all for joining. And I just came back last night from Vegas. I don't even know who the guest is next week, but we're already booked out all the way into June. So we have amazing guests coming up, and we will definitely do that again, Wesly, and bring in more of your wisdom and ask people maybe who are not familiar with Integral to the Level to watch this episode before, so we can have a seamless continuation for our next conversation.
Would love it, man. Anytime you want to be on, Mark.
Love you very much, man, and thanks for all your support over the years while I was writing my books.
My friend, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Love you too.
Bye, Wesly.
Cheers.